The reason why we want to review Chapter 3 is that it'll be clear for the rest of the semester that we're going to do this demand and supply analysis again and again and again. So Chapter 3, even though it is just a review of your microeconomics, it is very important for the whole semester here. Here, let's switch the focus to the macroeconomics. So what's the difference between microeconomics and macroeconomics? In microeconomics, we analyze individual markets. Say, for example, Apple market. Say, for example, haircut market. Say, for example, labor market. Say, for example, money market. In microeconomics, we analyze the individual markets. But in macroeconomics, we are analyzing the aggregate market. Therefore, the goods here is the aggregate market. We want to use demand and supply analysis to analyze the aggregate market. So, what do we do in our demand and supply analysis? The first question is, what is the variable on the x-axis? And then what is the variable on the y-axis? We are going to use Chapter 4, the whole chapter, to define the variable on the x-axis. You know the answer. The variable on the x-axis is the quantity of aggregate market. But what does that mean? The quantity of the aggregate market. We're going to spend Chapter 4 in talking about that. And then the next is the variable on the y-axis. We are going to spend a small portion of Chapter 4 and half of the Chapter 5 to define the variable on the y-axis. That is, the price of the aggregate market. Then we are going to draw the demand curve and the supply curve, which are called aggregate demand curve and aggregate supply curves. So how do we draw a demand curve? Again, we fix a price and then find a quantity demanded and get a dot. We are going to spend the whole Chapter 11 to get one dot on the aggregate demand curve. And then we're going to use Chapter 10 to draw the aggregate demand curve. And then we are going to use Chapter 10 to draw the aggregate supply curve. And then we find the equilibrium. We are going to spend Chapter 12 to talk about the variable on the y-axis. Remember, in Chapter 4 and Chapter 5, we define the variable on the y-axis. Chapter 12 is to discuss the variable on the y-axis. And then in Chapters 13 and Chapter 8, we're going to shift the curves and find the new equilibrium. Are those all look familiar to you? Do they all look familiar to you? Yes, that's exactly what we did in Chapter 3. And that's the whole semester. Those are the chapters that we are going to cover in this class. So the whole semester, the whole principles of macroeconomic class is to do a demand and supply analysis of the aggregate market. All right? So let's start with chapter 4. Remember, in chapter 4, we're going to define the variable on the x-axis. So the market is for aggregate market. What is the variable on the x-axis? The answer is the quantity of the aggregate market. So what does that mean? What do we produce in this economy? What kind of goods do we have in this economy? Say, for example, we have a simple economy. We produce 2 apples and 3 haircuts and 5 books. So what is the number we should put here? What is the quantity of this aggregate market? 2 apples, 3 haircuts, 5 books. Can I say 10? No. 10 what? Right? But we want to come up with a number. But we have so many goods in the economy. Therefore, there is no the quantity of the aggregate market. The best we can do is to find a measure. A measure of the quantity of the aggregate market. And there are many measures. Many measures. In chapter 4, we are going to talk about the most popular measure that is used in the economy, which is called the real GDP. The real GDP. So what is the variable on the x-axis? The answer is the real GDP. So why do we want to know the real GDP? Well, it is a measure of the quantity of the aggregate market. So it is a number. It is a number. If we have this number, we can compare the economic welfare over time. Say, for example, in 1970, the GDP, the real GDP the number for your grandma is 100. And now in 2018, your number is 200. Then we can say you lead a better life than your grandma because this number is bigger than this number. So we can compare the economic welfare over time. Or, at the same time, in 2018, say for example, this number for China is 100. And this number for the United States is 200. Then we can say that in 2018, we lead a better life than the Chinese. So we can use this number to do international welfare comparison. And this is the most popular measure, real GDP, that is used for economic welfare over time comparison and international welfare comparison. Remember, our goal is to define real GDP and use it as a measure of the quantity of the aggregate market. But before we define real GDP, it's easier to understand nominal GDP first. So let's introduce nominal GDP first. And after we understand what nominal GDP is, then we will define real GDP. So what is nominal GDP? GDP is the gross domestic product. Gross domestic product. So there are 4 key points in the definition of nominal GDP. So nominal GDP is the market value of all the final goods and services produced within a country during a specific time period. Alright, so let's talk about these 4 one by one. First, nominal GDP is the market value. Why? Why do we need market value? Remember, we want to measure the quantity of aggregate market. We have 2 apples, 3 haircuts, 5 books. But we cannot add 2 apples to 3 haircuts to 5 books. That doesn't make sense. 2 plus 3 plus 5 equal to 10. 10 what? Okay, it doesn't make sense. But there is a way we can add apples to haircuts to books. What can we do that? The answer is, if we can use a measure to measure books, haircuts, and books using the same units, then we can sum them up. Then what is the unit we can use? The answer is the value, the dollar value of the books, the dollar value of the oranges, the apples, the haircuts. Therefore, we can add them up. Say, for example, we have 2 apples, 3 haircuts, and 5 books. We cannot add them up. But if apple is $1 each, haircut is $10 each, books is $50 each, then 2 apple is equivalent to $2, 3 haircuts is equivalent to $30, 5 books is equivalent to $250. Can you add up $2, $30, and $250? The answer is yes. It's $282. That's how we add up apples, haircuts, and books. Therefore, for the whole economy, we have to know the market value, the value of the apples, the price of the apples. So this is the market value of apples, haircuts, and books. We have to have the market price to get the market value and sum them up. If in the production there's no market value, then there's no way to value your production, right? Say, for example, now I'm teaching you economics. I'm providing education service to you. Is my service included in the calculation of nominal GDP? The answer is yes, because my service has a market value. The price of my service is what the university paid me. However, if I spend exactly the same effort at home to teach my daughter math, is my teaching math to my daughter included in the calculation of US GDP? The answer is no. Why not? Because my daughter doesn't pay me. There's no market value of my service to my daughter. So my service cannot be included in the calculation of nominal GDP. Another example. On weekends, I mow my lawn. I made my house more beautiful. My neighbors love my lawn. My neighbors are happy when they see my lawn. So when I'm mowing my lawn, I have contribution to the economy. However, when I'm mowing my lawn, my effort, is that included in the calculation of nominal GDP? The answer is no, because when I mow my lawn, nobody paid me. There's no market price of my mowing lawns. However, if I'm tired, so I hire my neighbor kid John to mow my lawn, and then I pay him $30 per hour. So when he's mowing my lawn, is his service included in the calculation of nominal GDP? The answer is yes, because he's supposed to report what I pay him when he's filing the tax. Therefore, John mowing lawns for me is included in the calculation of GDP, but I mow my lawn by myself is not included in the calculation of GDP. So market is very important. Say for example, let me ask you a question. The country, Colombia. Does Colombia's nominal GDP overvalue their production or undervalue their production? Let me say it again. Does the GDP, nominal GDP of Colombia, overvalue or undervalue their actual production? The answer is undervalue. Why? Because Colombia produces a lot of drugs, and those are underground activities. There's no market. Well, there's an underground market, but there's no market price for their drugs. They are not reported. Therefore, these drugs are not included in their nominal GDP. Therefore, their nominal GDP undervalues the actual production of Colombia. The second key point is when you calculate nominal GDP, you can only calculate the final goods and services. Final goods and services. So what are final goods and services? Well, in order to understand final goods and services, we have to introduce intermediate goods, not final goods. Intermediate goods. What are the intermediate goods? Let me give you an example. Say, for example, farmers grow wheat, and then sell it to the millers. For $10. The millers grind the wheat to make flour, and then sell the flour to the baker for $25. And then the bakers use the flour to make bread, and then sell the bread to Myers for $30. And then Myers put the bread on shelf on their shelves and then sell it to you for $55. The sucker. Alright, then what is the value of the total production of this economy during this process for this shelved bread? The answer should be $55. Why? Because wheat, flour, bread are all intermediate goods. If you add up the value of the intermediate goods, what do you get? You get 10 plus 25 plus 30 plus 55, which is 0, 12, $120. Now, think about this. What is farmers' contribution to the economy? $10. What is millers' contribution to the economy? The answer is $15 because the millers add $15 value on top of the wheat to make flour. So millers' contribution to the economy is $15. Bakers' contribution to the economy is $5 because they only add $5 to the value of flours. And what is Meijer's contribution to the economy? To the shelved bread? The answer is $25 because they add $25 of value to the bread produced by bakers. So what is the total contribution of these guys in the economy? The answer is 10 plus 15 plus 5 plus 25. The answer is exactly 55, which is the value of the final goods. If you include the intermediate goods in the calculation of nominal GDP, you are going to double count the contribution of millers, bakers, and Meijers. That is why we can only include final goods and services in the calculation of nominal GDP. Okay, let me give you another example. Michelin, the fat guy, the white, big, fat guy, Michelin boy. Michelin produces tires. Okay? If they sell the tires to Ford, so tires in Ford, is that an intermediate goods or a final goods? The answer is it's an intermediate goods because the final goods produced by Ford is a car and tires are just part of the car. So tires in Ford are intermediate goods. But if exactly the same Ford tires produced by Michelin, but they are not sold to the Ford, they are sold to the discount tire. So when you have flat tires, you go to discount tires to get new tires. Then these tires are final goods. They are final goods in discount tire because they are not intermediate goods of a newly produced cars. Therefore, exactly the same tires, those tires in Ford is intermediate goods. But those tires in discount tires are final goods. The third key point of the definition of nominal GDP is the goods must be produced within a country. Why? Because it's gross domestic products. So it must be within the domestic country. The key word here is produced. Produced. Because it is gross domestic products. So the goods must be produced within a country to be counted as gross domestic products. Say for example, a Ford F-150 is sold for $30,000 in Japan. Are those $30,000 included in the nominal GDP of US or Japan? The answer is US, because it is produced in US. It is our contribution to our economy. Therefore, it is not included in Japanese nominal GDP. It is included in US GDP. How about stocks? Say Microsoft stocks price goes from $80 to $85. Does that mean our nominal GDP increases? The answer is no. Stock market fluctuation is only a movement of dollars. It is not a production. The stock price goes up, that's only the price, in the price. Microsoft does not produce more. Okay? Therefore, production is very important. Things in the money market, or the transfer payments, it's just a movement of not nominal money. They are not produced. Therefore, they cannot be included in gross domestic product. Finally, the fourth key point of the definition of nominal GDP is it must be during a specific time period. Usually it's a year or a quarter. Therefore, when you hear GDP, you usually hear that the GDP of the United States in the first quarter of 2018. So GDP must be defined within a specific country because it's gross domestic products during a specific time. Say for example, if today, 2018, you buy a 2015 model Ford, a brand new one, but it was produced in 2015. It's much cheaper now. Say for example, you buy it for $30,000. Are those $30,000 included in the US GDP? The answer is yes, because it's a Ford produced in the United States. Should it be included in US GDP in 2015 or 2018? Let me say it again. This car is produced in 2015 and sold in 2018. So should it be included in 2015 GDP or 2018 GDP? The answer is 2015 because it is gross domestic product. Whenever it is produced, that is the contribution of Ford to the economy. That is in 2015. Therefore, it is included in 2015 nominal GDP in the United States. Again, nominal GDP is the market value of all the goods and services produced within a country during a specific time period. Therefore, nominal GDP measures the total value of the production of the economy. And there is a very important concept in macroeconomics. That is, everything produced in this economy must be purchased by some people in this economy by using their income. Therefore, if you sum up the total production in this economy, and then you calculate the total expenditure in this economy, they should be equal. And if you sum up the income, the total income in this economy, it should also be equal to the expenditure, because you can spend money only you have income. You have income because you produce. Therefore, for the whole macroeconomy, total production should be equal to total expenditure, should be equal to total income. As you can imagine, to calculate the nominal GDP in an economy is a very, very complicated job. Think about the discount tires and the Ford tires example. It's very complicated. All right. In the United States, the one who is responsible for calculate GDP for the United States is the Bureau of Economic Analysis. And to make sure that their calculation of GDP is accurate, they use 3 approaches to calculate this number. If these 3 numbers are close to each other, then the problems will be minor. If one of the method is very different from the other one, then there must be some problem in the calculation of nominal GDP. Then they will have to do it again or check for errors. All right? Remember, in the macroeconomy, total production should be equal to total expenditure, which should be equal to total income. Therefore, the Bureau of Economic Analysis used the production approach, expenditure approach, and income approach to calculate the nominal GDP. And these 3 numbers should be very close to each other. The production approach is the one we just talked about. That is the bread, the wheat, flour, bread, shelved bread example. Okay? They use value added approach. You add up farmers' contribution, miller's contribution, and baker's contribution, and Myers' contribution, the value-added approach to calculate nominal GDP. Next, we want to introduce the expenditure approach and the income approach. As you can see, the production approach, when you add up the value produced by farmer, miller, baker, and Myers, those are producers. Those are the suppliers of the economy. Now, income approach is to sum up the expenditure of the demanders. Remember in chapter 3, we said that it is very important to know who the demanders are before you draw the demand curve. Alright, say for example in the Apple market, the demanders are the consumers and the suppliers are the farmers. It's easy. But in a macro economy, who are the demanders and who are the suppliers? I am teaching, so I'm providing education service. So in that sense, I'm a supplier in the economy. However, I also go to Myers to buy bread. Therefore, I'm also a demander. Therefore, in the economy, in the whole economy, in the macro economy, everybody is a demander and everybody is a supplier. Therefore, it's very hard to distinguish demanders and suppliers. Therefore, in macroeconomics, we use the behaviors to distinguish demanders and suppliers. We don't separate demanders from suppliers based on their job or what they are doing. What they are doing. We based on their behaviors because everybody is a demander, everybody is a supplier. So the demanders, how can we call them demanders? They are demanders because they buy things. They have expenditure. Okay? So based on the demander's behavior, we separate the economy into 4 sectors: households, firms, governments, and foreign sectors. These 4 sectors are sectors that have expenditures. Household expenditure is called consumption. Firms' expenditure is called investment. Government's expenditure is the government expenditure. And foreign sector's expenditure is export minus import, or net export. Therefore, according to expenditure approach, we sum up the expenditures from the 4 sectors in the economy. Households' expenditure is consumption. Firms' expenditure is investment. Government's expenditure is G, government expenditure. Foreign sector's expenditure is export minus import, that is net export. Therefore, GDP is equal to C plus I plus G plus X minus M. To make sure you understand this, let's use an example. Say for example, today, 2018, you buy a $30,000 Ford F-150. But this Ford is produced in 2014. So you buy a brand new car, but it is an old model. Then, first question is this $30,000 included in which country's nominal GDP? The answer is the United States, because it's Ford. Which year is it included? The answer is 2014, because it is produced in 2014, no matter when it is sold. Okay? So remember, it should be included in 2014 GDP. Therefore, 2014 GDP should be $3,000. Did household buy this car in 2014? The answer is no. You buy this car in 2018. So in 2014, consumption is 0. Did government buy this car? No. Did you export this car? No. Of course, it is not an import. Therefore, when this car was produced in 2014, it was not sold. Therefore, the firm keeps it in the inventory. And inventory is part of the investment. Therefore, you have $30,000 equal to $30,000. Let me say it again. In 2014, this car was produced in the United States by Ford. Therefore, it is included in 2014 GDP. Under which category? The answer is investment, because it was not sold, it is in the inventory. Now, you buy this car in 2018, right? So the household expenditure is $30,000. However, these $30,000 should not be included in 2018 GDP. Therefore, it is 0. Is it purchased by government? No, it is purchased by you. Is it exported? No, it is not an import. So what happened? What happened is, remember, in the inventory in 2014, $30,000 are here. Now, you take that $30,000 off the inventory. Therefore, investment is negative $30,000. You take that 2014 inventory off the 2018 inventory. Therefore, 0 is equal to 30,000 minus 30,000 plus 0, 0, 0. It is an equation. Now, second example. Buying a $30,000 Audi. Who produces Audi? Germany. Therefore, these $30,000 should be in German nominal GDP. Okay? So this is United States 2018 GDP. Do we produce this car? No, so it is not in our GDP. Did you buy this car? Yes. This is not US firm's expenditure. Government does not buy it. It is not an export, but it is an import from Germany. Therefore, import is $30,000. Do you see that? That is why we have to minus import. Therefore, 0 is equal to $30,000 minus $30,000, which is equal. Now, if a Japanese buys a $30,000 Ford, then what happened? Okay, whose GDP it is? US GDP, right? Okay, therefore, US GDP in 2018 should include this $30,000. We assume that they are both produced in 2018, okay? Does the US consumer buy it? The answer is no. It is Japanese who buys it. Okay? US firm don't buy it. Government doesn't buy it. Is that our export? The answer is yes. So export is $30,000. It is not an import. Therefore, US 2018 GDP, $30,000. It is in the export. Now, let's look at the United States nominal GDP using expenditure approach. Consumption is the biggest amount. Investment, government expenditure, and we have a negative net export. That is, we imported more than we exported. So the total nominal GDP is 14,579.